Warning! Listening to the PM-ProShow may cause sudden clarity in leadership and project management, plus side effects like higher pay, smoother transitions, better teamwork, and dangerously efficient results. I'm Tim Dalhouse, retired U.S. Marine and founder of PM-ProLearn, where we bridge the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom. Each episode delivers battle-tested strategies for success to help you lead, transition, and train like a pro. Welcome to the PM-ProShow. Gear up with us to suck less and win more.
Hey everybody, welcome to the PM-ProShow. I am Robert Earl King Jr. and we will be discussing bridging the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom. And so with us, I have Josh Atkinson, our Chief Strategy Officer. Josh, how's it going?
It is great. Glad to be here. And Ken, just gotta say thanks for coming on and glad to have you coming on as a guest today.
Thanks, Josh. I also have with us our Director of Operations, Jamie Jett. Jamie, how's it going?
Good, Rob. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Ken.
Thanks, Jamie. And I also have with us our Client Advisor, Ben Watson. Ben, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, glad to be here.
Great. And I have with us our newest guest, Ken Killingsworth. So Ken, if I can just quickly give a short description for our listeners. Ken is a 29-year Army veteran who now leads corporate learning and leadership development at Watco companies. As the head of Watco University, he designs strategic training systems that scale talent, training, and safety and service in the transportation industry. He's also an Agile certified practitioner, helping service members prepare for meaningful civilian careers. Ken, what's going on? Did I get that right?
Earl, yeah, it's pretty close.
Pretty close.
So yeah, I think we're spot on. And Josh, Jamie, Ben, Earl, thanks for having me this morning. Pleasure to be a part of this. As I was sharing earlier, PM-ProLearn, I think, helped me in my transition. So it's always a great opportunity when I feel I can give back to this program.
Awesome. Hey, we're glad to have you as alumni. So just to open up for our listeners and gentlemen, we want to first, before jumping into these segments of bridging the gap between the battlefield and the boardroom, Ken, I would like to quickly, could you elaborate on like the major points of your transition from your Army career to now your civilian career?
Yeah, I think so I retired from the military about 4.5 years ago. It's interesting that you never, when you're in the military and you're trying to kind of know what life after the military might look like, you've got those folks that are already retired and they always tell you, you'll know when it's time. Interesting enough, I think I knew when it was time, and you just know. It's interesting how it works. There's not something that leads up to it. But I thoroughly enjoyed my time in the military. Actually spent about almost 32, it's 31 years and some change. Started off as an infantryman, basic training at Harmony Church, Fort Benning, been all over the world, got to be around some tremendous leaders, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. Culminated my military experience at the United States Military Academy as the Corps Cadets Command Sergeant Major at West Point, and just met some tremendous people along the way. I think I think most of all about my time in the military, people ask me if I miss the military. I miss relationships. I miss people. I don't necessarily miss, all of the stuff associated with the military, but I loved my time in the military. And I think any veteran knows exactly what I'm talking about when I describe it that way.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you so much, Ken. So, gentlemen, I'd like to open it up for all of us and then also give this question to Ken. The first part we're really discussing is equipping veterans to crush their transitions, right? So, Ken, I heard a little bit about your transition. First, I'd like to throw this to Josh just to help us, get the scope of what we're trying to say here. Why is it that we are even trying to get veterans to crush their transition? What difficulty may we see, or what training might need to be given to help that process? Josh, can you help us with that?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with transition as an overarching concept is that the military doesn't talk about transition until the end, right? And I use a leaving home mentality. That if I wait until my kids are 17 before I start talking about leaving my house, how ready are they going to be in 1 year, right? And leaving the military is almost even more than that. And it requires you to learn even more than that, because you're not just leaving the environment, you're moving into a foreign country called civilian land. And it's a different world, right? And so I think in order to crush the transition, we have to realize that it's a throughout your career process. It's not a at the end process. And that to me is the biggest problem, right? No one in the military talks about it like that. No one's looking at that problem as a throughout the career problem. which is why I think we're so passionate about what we're doing with PM-ProLearn and why we're talking about integrating training throughout your career. Because every time I talk to a veteran at the end, they go, man, I wish I would have done that throughout my career. I wish I would have had that over time, not as a exclamation point at the end, because that causes so much more friction. It causes even some more unknowns or some what I call panic buying that, getting a job is like getting a date. And they're like, I just need a date with anybody. I'll date everyone. So I just grab whatever I can. And that's also not a good way to join a relationship, so I think that's really kind of the framework we're starting from. I saw Ken chuckle a little bit and laugh a little bit. So I'd be curious to throw it back and say, Ken, what was that like in your regard? And how would that analogy resonate with your own experience? And then I know, Jamie and Ben had their own experiences too.
Yeah, Josh, you're spot on. I mean, I didn't look at transition until I had made the decision that and talked to my wife and said, hey, I'm ready to retire. And it was like, okay, what now? To your point. And so for me, when I started transitioning, I actually once I made the decision, I actually had about 18, closer to maybe 20 months, almost 2 years to prep. And that was, I don't think a year's enough. I don't think I would have been there with just a year. I think you want to lean more towards 2 years if you can. And so I started really trying to figure out what is it I want to do after service. And it's kind of funny. I jumped on LinkedIn, a great platform. And it's kind of funny where I started what I call job scrolling. I was like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. Oh, I think I could do that. And at the end of the day, I'd really not reflected on what I wanted to do, right? What at my core I wanted to do, what I felt like my strengths helped me to be able to pursue, and then what I needed to do in terms of transition to fill gaps.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I looked at it from kind of that perspective on what is it I want to do, how do I get there, and what strengths do I currently have so that I know where I can fill gaps at. An example for me was I was really close to completing my graduate degree in HR. So I completed that, and then I started looking for at certifications in HR to come to find out that there's only a few spaces in HR that I really wanted to work in, and a lot of that had to do with learning and development. Those were really the spaces I wanted to do. So I talked to people in learning and development instead of going for like a SHRM CP or a PHR or something like that type of certification. I pursued a PMP because I wanted to get in learning development and managing projects and programs, human capital projects and programs. The mentors that I talked to when I was transitioning thought that would be a better gap filler than trying to go for a SHRM CP. So I hope that gives you
I actually have a question on that, because you mentioned the PMP sort of like encompassing multiple things like learning and development and or some other categories. So I guess just a temperature check with the group. Usually what I've heard too now is that the PMP sort of like can cover multiple avenues, right? So is that like, something that's like a good foundation just to start thinking about in terms of, hey, if you aren't sure, like the PMP is also an area that can get you more professional while you're also still trying to refine it? Or is it more of just like, hey, here's the PMP, this is the specific path? Because what I'm hearing, I think what I've heard from you, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, is that like this could sort of apply in multiple places, right? Anyone else?
I think the short answer is yes, or it can apply to multiple places. Mm-hmm. I think whatever job you're in, a PMP certification is going to make you better at that job just because you're going to look at it from a different perspective and a different lens.
No, I agree.
And I would add on, I talk to guys all the time that are, in the military still, and, like myself, I was military police, right? So it's like if you're not doing police work on the outside, like you got to completely shift your mindset and your focus, and same thing for like infantry, that kind of thing, artillery, right? Like some of these other MOSs or specialties that it's like it doesn't necessarily have a path in the civilian side that's directly aligned with that, unless you go directly into law enforcement or into contractor work or something like that, right? And so I talk to these guys all the time who are signing up and saying like, well, I'm not sure what I want to do yet. So I'm not sure what certification to go for. So for me, it's guiding them into, a lot of times we come up with PMP because it's about what industry do you want to work in? Well, I'm not sure yet. Okay, Well, something like Lean Six Sigma Green Belt or something like ACP in that, I mean, they're not industry specific, right? But they do come from particular industries, manufacturing, supply chain, through software development, IT, those kinds of things for these different certifications. And they're very focused and more in depth on specific target areas, if you will, right? And so the PMP is a very broad, it kind of covers a lot of different topics at a high level, at a leadership and management style level. So starting with that gives you that kind of translation of your experience and everything, and introduces these separate topics and everything in the material. And then you can say, okay, now I really enjoyed that quality side. Let me focus on Lean Six Sigma Green Belt and manufacturing and supply chain. Or I really liked the speed and agility in the agile stuff that I learned. Let me go focus on that and get a certification in that, right? And so the PMP, while it doesn't span every single job, right, it does translate across industries. And so you can kind of take that and then focus and deep dive in these later on things like ACP and that after the PMP to really, okay, now I know I want to go after that. I didn't know before, but I really liked that piece of it. Let me deep dive that side.
I just forgot, Ben, you talk with, so many individuals, probably daily, weekly about this. And I guess, is that like the usual thought is, hey, I'm just unsure of where to go?
Yeah, I mean, the PMP gets thrown around a lot in the military now, right? Like it's kind of become known, like, hey, what we do and what we call operations is project management on the outside, right? And so that's becoming more and more well known. And so people kind of know they want to go for the PMP or for project management, but they don't necessarily know why, right? Or that they want to focus, like Ken was saying, hey, let me talk to these people in this job that I want to go for, and do those informational interviews and talk to them and see what's actually applicable in my day to day. They're not there yet, right? And some of these guys are 6 months out from getting out, right? And so that kind of brings us back to the preparing early, right? The earlier you get these things, the more exposure you have to these topics and everything early, you can then kind of focus and say, you know what? Yeah, I'm doing law enforcement for the Marine Corps right now, but I got my PMP and I understand project management, and I really like that quality side. And I really want to focus on manufacturing and supply chain, and, because I got an MBA in supply chain management, right? So it's like, I want to pair that with something that also aligns to that industry so that I can pivot into that. And let me go talk to those industry professionals who are aligned with those types of jobs to see, okay, what is actually applicable? What should I be learning now? What should I be focusing on? I mean, if you're just stuck in your day to day, as law enforcement, let's say, or as an artilleryman, I mean, you're not going to understand what else is out there to then go say, hey, I might want to go for this job, or I might want to talk to these people about what's out there, and until you're really faced with it and it's in your face and you're like, man, I got 6 months and I don't know what I want to do with my life.
So since we're talking on transition then and getting ahead early, another one of our segments is helping unit level skills be elevated to dominate the fight, right? Because hey, we're focused on, I was an infantryman, I was a chemical officer, right? So for me, I was working closely with engineers and team protection, military police. So, the PMP was very real closely heard in my circles because the engineers were always most definitely doing projects, and they had a whole system where they would take PMP classes, and that's how I heard about it. They had one scheduled, and I went to go take it because I was doing projects as well. So this question is more, I guess, directed towards operations with Jamie and back to Ken as well. I'll throw this one to you, Jamie. Getting ahead early on this, right? Getting into the PMP, even if, let's say, someone, says, that's not where I'm going right now. I am, infantry or artillery. In what ways does the PMP can still be useful already, even before thinking about transitions? Is there anything that you've noticed in your experience?
Yeah, I think one of the major benefits that nobody's touched on yet is it teaches you a common language, right, of the civilian world, right? So all the terms that we use in PMP, translate very well, especially when you're trying to relate what you've done in the military, whatever your core specialty was. Now you could start, instead of throwing around your normal military jargon, now we're tying a lot of the stuff that we use, like commander, first sergeant, right, to specific civilian terminology that everybody understands, because PMP it's not industry specific, right? It's just a new language about how to talk about things, right? While it does provide a baseline level of knowledge that people are looking for, it's really practicing that new language. That way, when you go and sit down for an interview, or you start talking about, informal interview, things of that nature, right? Now we can start to relate what we've been doing for the last however many years, in my case, 25 years. How do I start to talk about that people who have never, ever been, exposed to the military, which is a majority of the folks, and actually have a basis of common understanding, right? And so using that properly, practicing it before you get out, relating things back will help you write resumes, will help you sit down for those interviews, prepare for things, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things. While I agree with everybody, what Ben and Ken said earlier, yeah, 100% sure. It's really just learning that new language and practicing it before you get out.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask Ken too. Jamie, multiple times I've learned so many acronyms: the USR, OPWARDS, MS, DTS, Defense Travel System, right? And it's just, becoming so common with those now. I may accidentally use those phrases, and then someone says, "What was that?" So Ken, have you, noticed that as well, in terms of like there's a new language, there's a new culture in this transition process that we can get ahead on with things like, Agile Certified Practitioner or PMP or any of your other professional certifications that you've noticed?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie's spot on, and he brings up a fantastic point. One of the harder things to do is to translate your military experience so that it connects with, that company that you're trying to get hired for. And I think that's where one of the biggest misunderstandings kind of happens, right? Is translate your military experience into civilian roles. And I think that's where companies sometimes miss opportunities, is because it's not necessarily translated. The TA team's looking at stuff and they're like, I'm not exactly sure this person's going to be the right fit for the team for whatever reason. And if there's anybody listening out there from a civilian or a corporate company, I would say if you get something like that from a veteran, try to find a veteran on your team that might be able to help you translate that, because you just might find the value you're looking for. It's just that the military veteran didn't translate it correctly, to James' point.
That's actually our last segment before we get ready to do a quick conclusion of the game, which is helping these predominantly civilian organizations retain and even resource veteran firepower, right? Mm-hmm. So one idea is that, with your experience, if let's say I had no military experience at all and I was trying to get into the minds of veterans, I'd say, hey, what are the things that I need to be looking for in order to find these people with, strong stress management skills, highly technical skills in their craft, or just, leading and engaging stakeholders? What are some of the maybe highlights either at Watco University or that you've just noticed in your general transition, looking at a broad range of job locations, civilian organizations that are trying to retain veteran firepower, make them look more attractive? That's the word I was looking for. You're using the dating idea, right, Josh?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about attractiveness versus value to veterans all the time. It's like sometimes certs make you look attractive, but regardless of whether or not the other company finds that attractive, it's going to increase your value no matter what, right? So I think from a corporate perspective, how does a company do the same thing? How do they increase their attractiveness to a potential veteran? Then how do they also increase the value that they're going to provide to that transitioning veteran? And I think a lot of companies that are out there focus on hiring, not utilizing or retaining veterans, right? And they try to get them in the door without understanding that that's the easy part, right? And a lot of veterans quit within the first 3 to 6 months because no one helped them figure out who they were and what they wanted to really do. So, Ken, actually, to answer those questions on your end, because I know you're working in L&D and training and development and things with Watco, which is a massive logistics company, by the way. To those that didn't know what Watco does, go check them out. I love seeing the growth that you've put out there and the value of training and standardization, which really comes from a military background. I think in your exposure, and especially your endpoint out there at West Point. What do companies listen to this, or hiring managers listen to this, show need to understand about the retaining and utilizing veteran talent, not attracting or just attracting veteran talent?
Yeah, Josh, great question. And I think I can answer that in certainly general terms. I mean, because every person's probably looking for something just a little different. But I think in general, like, veterans want to feel like they're a part of the team. So we attract them, we get them in, and all of a sudden maybe they don't necessarily have that same feeling, that same core purpose that they did in the. So I think you really gotta. So obviously you're going to get someone who has, some great leadership skills, but I think what we don't necessarily understand is they want to be a part of the team. They don't want to cooperate with other teams. They want to collaborate with other teams. There's a huge difference there, right? And so if they can collaborate with other teams and now they feel a part of it, they kind of understand their purpose, and it's going to make the overall team better. They also, I think, at the end of the day, a lot of veterans hone their problem-solving skills in some pretty high-pressure situations. That doesn't necessarily mean in combat. That can be non-combat situations, because we all know that there's certainly been high-pressure situations in any job that we've been in, right? So I would say that you're going to find someone that also is going to be very committed to the team's success, and so they equally want to feel a part of that team, going back to my first comment. And I think those are just 2 or 3 comments, Josh, that connect to your question.
So like the good to great, finding the right seat on the bus, right? I think veterans are Swiss Army knives in so many ways. Jamie with SF and Comm and a bunch of stuff that he did, Ben with MP and then acquisitions and program management. We've all been in so many different situations. How do you help veterans understand the right seat on that bus, right? And you coming out of infantry, finishing out the Sergeant Major Academy, becoming a Sergeant Major, and then saying, hey, I've got a degree in HR, now I want to run projects, right? I mean, that's a world of circles, you can go around, but from the veteran, like, how do you help them find the right seat to want to stay, right? Or to want to leave early to go to the right place? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think in some cases we think we know what we want and we don't.
I think that's most cases.
You go in the military and it's really about, learning. You get promoted on potential, you learn your job, and then 2 or 3 years, it's like, okay, what's next? Or in the Marine Corps, or in the Navy, Air Force, doesn't matter. Slower out here. It's not like that. And so I think sometimes veterans get bored. Like, I've been doing this job for 2 years. What's next? Well, more of the same, right? So I think our veterans got to better understand it. I think the other piece of it too is what's most important to you. And when you're looking at a job, I think a lot of people obviously look at compensation, and yeah, that's always going to be pretty high, but quality of life, team dynamics, culture. There's so many other things that you really got to weight. And I'm talking, a weight against, do you feel like it's like you're following your purpose? And I think sometimes we just chase the first job, and I say we veterans chase the first job, they jump on it, next thing you know, it's not what they wanted, or they were doing the whole job and scroll and it didn't connect to what they want to do, what their strengths are, and potentially any gap filling that they did to get there.
I guess another question on the same lens, and Jamie, I love your thoughts on this for your transition. How many assumptions do you think veterans make that the culture will be the same, that the feeling will be the same, and that it's really just focusing on the title? Because in the military, those are non-negotiables. Those are things that always exist. So Jamie, I'm curious, what did you discover in your first job after the military? And how did that then drive your future job decision makings? And Ken, for you, did you even think about that a little bit? So I'll go to Jamie first and then kind of jump back to Ken.
I think for, at least in my personal transition, it took me so long to find a job. I kind of did jump on that first thing without considering things like the culture of the organization. I didn't put enough prep work in. I didn't ask enough questions during the interview, right? Because they always give you time, at least every interview I've sat in, and say, hey, do you have any questions for us? And I always drew it blank, like, what kind of questions do you want me to ask you, right? Based on the first job I had as an IT project manager at a bank, I learned about their culture over 6 or 8 months, and they lacked a lot of accountability, and it didn't really line up with a lot of my personal core values, right? And so I think that's the important piece in terms of preparing for that transition on the service member, not just the organization that's hiring, is to think about those things, right? What was it that that drives you? What drove you in the military? So it's not just about technical skills for the industry that you're going into, but a lot of it, you could teach a lot of people a lot of different things skill wise, right? Or industry wise, but the corporate culture is really, I think, one of the more important pieces that a lot of folks don't think about in terms of making that transition and taking that new job. And you really don't, there's not a whole lot of opportunity unless the hiring organization is willing to take the time to kind of work through that. You get into these structured interviews for jobs and things, and they forget about that piece, right? They're not selling themselves so much, especially large corporate entities. They're like, people just want to work for us. We'll just put out a job. Everybody will apply. We'll figure out the best of the bunch based on their structured interview, right? But they never really sell themselves in terms of culture. There's a handful of them out there that do, right? But in the most part, that's what the veteran piece, the veterans themselves, I think that's the piece that they get the most out of, right? To try to figure that out.
Kind of to Ken, and how was it for you with Watco? I mean, what drove you there? And did you actually think about the things you're talking about, right? Culture, purpose. Were those part of the questions you were asking, or did you just kind of assume what that was going to feel like for you?
So I did, Josh, but only because I talked to folks like yourself, and I did a ton of informational interviews, right? That helped inform what I wanted to look at or what I wanted to be. And I did shop around. I did do interviews. But I'll tell you what, when I went to Watco, I was like, man, I hope they pick me. It was a very different culture when I went in. It was not the people there, you could feel cared about the people, in the office next to them. And even so, like the people that were not in that building, but the people out on docks, out on our railroads, you could feel it. That was a part of like discussions about supporting team members. Yeah, it was different, and it's hard to describe, right? It's kind of like culture in a unit that company or that battalion that you loved. It's like that comes to mind. Oh, my best company was X, right? It was the same feeling, and yeah, it was pretty special. I was like, I really did. I said, wow, I went through more than one interview that day because they asked me to come up, and I went to one of their corporate headquarters, and I interviewed with a couple of folks that day, and I did. I said to myself, wow, I really hope they pick me because this is a great place to be. I wanted to be a part of it. So yeah.
And so just to conclude on that, what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the culture that you shifted into was very welcoming. That's what I'm hearing, right? And so because of that, that's why they're still having you now, right? They're still retaining you to this day.
Well, I think they're retaining me for two reasons. Number one, I want to be there, and I'm contributing, I'm contributing to the team, and at the same time that I'm delivering value for the team, right? I think it's twofold. You don't get to keep a job if you're not contributing, and at the same time, on the other side of that, you got to be provide value too. So
yeah, no, we talk about that. Herzberg's motivation, right? Motivator factors and also hygiene factors, not just the environment, but the ability to output something. I got a game that I want to play with all of us real quick. Ken, you'll be like the main person for the game as we're getting ready to conclude. And so this is called the blind feedback game. So what it's going to happen is I'm going to give 5 things that I want Ken to rank. So 1 is the best thing about his transition, and 5 would be the worst thing. And I know they might all be good, but you only get 1 at a time, and you only get 1 slot at a time. So if you use up slot number 1, you can't put anything else as slot number 1 because it's the blind feedback game. For example, if Ken says, "Hey, I am putting, customer service as number 4," then I'm going to say, it's either Josh or Jamie because it's blind feedback. Why, if you could guess, why do you think he's putting that as number 4? And then we'll confirm that. So it'll be a way where you're getting down to like the small numbers of choices that you have left, and hopefully you'll save your hot top slots for the later ones. Maybe we'll see. But let's get ready to play. Hey Ken, ranking 1 through 5 first, from the best to the worst. 1 being best, 5 to being worst. Trust and camaraderie. Where would you put that on your transition since you've been moving from the Army to civilian life? Where would you rank that?
Trust and camaraderie. Yeah, I would say it's a 2.
Okay,
so it's a pretty high score to start off with, but yeah, I think I'm okay with it. Because if you don't have trust, you don't have much of anything. So I would say trust and camaraderie is a 2.
Okay, I hear it too. Ben, I know this is blind, right? Can you sort of maybe speculate as to why he went so far as to say 2? I know he sort of shared a little bit already. So what do you think of Ben?
Yeah, I mean, based just on the conversation today, right? The that trust and camaraderie is something that we look for, that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging, that collaboration, right, with a team and everything like that. As veterans, we want to continue feeling that on the outside because that's so ingrained in us in the military. When we get out, like we don't stop being who we are, right? And we want to still have that collaboration and that team environment and everything. But you can't have that without trust, right? And so I think trust is very important in whatever you're doing, but especially, in that employer-employee relationship, to be able to, hey, I'm not worried about my job. I'm not worried about losing my job. I'm not worried about, what the higher ups are thinking and all this other kind of stuff, because I'm worried about adding value and being a productive member of this team. And so I think that's a pretty good ranking. Number two,
All right, we'll see.
I'd probably put it the same way.
We might have a bunch of other things that are better now. We just used up the 2 slots, so we'll see. We'll see how Ken does it. Ken, here we go. Predictability. So you used up slot number 2. So you have 1, 3, 4, and 5. Where would you rank predictability in terms of your transition now?
I'm just going to say predictability in general.
I know it's just broad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty broad. I would say 4.
Okay. 4. Josh, can you speculate as to maybe why predictability was a 4 for Ken? What do you think?
So I think, one, knowing that he's a 32-year retiring command sergeant major, I think there's some stability that comes with that level of service, right? You're going to have some pay, some benefits. You really want more mission, purpose, and focus. And in some ways that predictability isn't as big of a deal because you have other things around you that allow you to be more dynamic and allow you to jump into something that's a little bit more unstable, potentially. I would definitely think if it was a, Ken or specialist, type person back then saying, hey, how much is predictability important to you? There's probably a different answer at that level of your career because, maybe you're single income and have a family behind you versus other things. But I think Ken thrives in the ambiguity, given his infantry background and wants to solve real problems. So I don't think predictability is as big of a deal, both professionally and personally, because of the things that I mentioned. But I'd be curious if I'm on point, Ken, or not.
Yeah, Ken. So you share a little bit on the trust camaraderie, so I didn't double check with Ben, but I didn't hear anything about why you put predictability as number 4. I'd like to hear too.
Yeah, to Josh spot on. Predictability is really not that important to me. I mean, do I want to know what I'm doing tomorrow? Yeah, sure. Do I want to know what I'm doing a year from now? It doesn't matter. As long as, to Josh's point, as long as I feel like I'm providing value and it's connected to kind of my core purpose, I'm all in. Doesn't matter.
All right. So you used slot 2, you used slot 4. So that leaves you with 1, 3, and 5. Okay, here's the next one then. So we talked about predictability generally. Let's talk specifically mission or objective clarity. When receiving a mission or receiving an objective, how do you feel that has improved or worsened from your Army to civilian career? I know I'm putting some pressure, I know.
I'm not going to describe it out front. I'm going to put that at 5.
Okay.
I have a good reason why I'm putting that as a 5 right now. But I'm not
JB, you got to speculate, JB. We're just speculating here. We're not saying anything bad about it.
I did not see that going 5. I'll say that. I did not see that going number 5.
JB, can you speculate as to why he may have put it as 5, and then we'll see if you're right or wrong?
Yeah, I think this one might go back to the amount of experience you've had in some of those unpredictable environments, right? Where you kind of got to set your own goals and objectives, right? As long as you're given some left and right limits in terms of problem solving and things of that nature, sometimes the organization setting those goals and objectives for you can actually hinder you, right? And it leads to less innovation, less new ideas. And I think if you're given an amount of freedom to address those yourself, especially if you're leading a team or what have you, you actually come out with better results, right? And sometimes, the military, based on our experiences, that lack of flexibility or the lack of you being able to be flexible to solve problems actually is a hindrance, right? So the more experience you have coming out of the military, that's probably down on the 5. I would kind of go back to Josh's. If it was a less experienced person, then yeah, that having somebody set those goals and objectives for you might feel like that's easier. But I think it does tampen down innovation and new ideas. So.
Ken, is any way aligned?
Yes, yeah. Coming from Jamie and his military background, autonomy is really important, right? And at the end of the day, I have some great leadership that I work for, and most of the time it's like we're looking at challenges across the company, and Watco's not the one that's going to roll out the 5-paragraph op order, and it's one of the things that I love about it, right? They're kind of like, we get together, we talk. Then we do a formal needs assessment. Well, it's not leadership doing that. It's Ken and a team doing a needs assessment to support a business case. And guess what? So it's bottom fed. It's not top down. And that's where we really get into this servant leadership at Watco, and it's supportive, and it's like, yep, let's roll it out. It can't, at the end of the day, it goes back to, it might be a plan that'll succeed, right? And I love that's one of the things I love about the company, and it's just the autonomy to help us be adaptable. And then there's accountability, right? At the end of the day, you rolled out the plan. This is your mission. Based off the needs assessment and the business case that you came forward to help solve this challenge. And I think most veterans would thrive in that kind of workspace.
Awesome.
It's interesting you say that, because when I think of mission clarity, I think that's clear vision, right? I don't think of micromanagement and tasking. I would say, is there clarity of vision? And for me, that's where I'd be like, if there's no clear vision, like I don't want to be there, because it's just absolute chaos. I can have autonomy, but if there's no clarity, then autonomy equals chaos. So how did you define mission clarity, I guess, Ken? Because that may have framed why you put it where you did.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Josh. I feel like I get great guidance and vision from my boss. In some cases, probably better than I did when I wore the uniform. And so I did not necessarily connect that, though, with mission statement, right? That to me, that's kind of strategic in terms of vision where the organization needs to go. Whereas mission is about achieving a certain goal or objective. Vision is just kind of like, hey, this is kind of how I see the environment and the landscape. And what's really nice is I can always come back and say, hey, I'm starting to see it a little different. And he's like, oh, okay, let's look at tweaking this or that. It's interesting. Let's talk about it. Does that answer?
It does. That's why we were framing that completely different. I used clarity as clearly a vision, or just where are we heading, not task clarity. So that to me would have been like, I thought you put like number one, like I want to know where we're going so I can operate independently underneath. And you're like, oh, I put it number, 4, or down the bottom. Like, whoa. 5. And like I can see it that way. So, anyways, let's finish this out, and then we
still have slots 1 and 3. So yeah, Ken, this is the.
And I could have wasted them since it's blind, but we'll see.
Yeah, the next one I'll just be is what type of swag they give you, right? But no. All right, here's the second to last one. 1 or 3. Pay. How has that transition been for you? The pay. 1, the best, or 3, just meh? What do you got? It's all you're stuck with, Ken.
Man.
And you still got one more after this, so we'll see what number 1 is.
I know, and you're probably saving a great one. So I'm going to go with 3. I'm going to go with 3 because, I'm going to wait. I'll wait until
I'll
you
guess.
Let me
guess.
And then I'll give my reason for going.
Let me guess. So, in the military, I was in the Army. I know you were in the Army too. So, what the pay is. It's, at every rank and level what the pay is. And there's even an expectation on certain time zones on, okay, at this point, I should be at this rank and receive this pay grade. So there's some predictability in that. And also, when you're getting paid, you're not thinking about things like, your food and your housing, because that's sort of, especially active, that's already being taken care of you. So the reason why it might be a 3 is that the pay might actually be better on the civilian side, but now I have to take into account all of these extra transactions and financials. And it might be a little bit more, there's more, freedom, but there's also more responsibility. That's why I'm thinking it's a 3. Even if the pay was better, there's still more things attached. Is that a little bit it? Or am I completely off?
Yeah, Earl.
It's okay if I'm completely off.
It is connected to that to a degree. I think for me, though, I think pay is only one part of total compensation. If you'd have said the word total comp, I might have had to use the 1 slot. And that kind of goes back to, veterans start going and looking at transition. And I would tell them they got to look further than just pay, because total comp is culture,
PTO,
the relationships of the people there. So many other things, right? Vacation time, benefits, all of that other stuff is total comp. And so I think you have to look at the bigger picture. And sometimes I think veterans get focused on pay. So I'd share that.
I've seen a company say, hey, we give 104, days off per year. And then the joke was that those were only the weekends, right? So Saturday and Sunday off.
But if you'd have said total comp, I would have absolutely put 1 because I think that encompasses everything that you really need to be looking at.
Well, so here's the number 1, and then this is for anybody to try and explain for Ken. But Ken, sleep. Before Ken explains sleep, why do we get left with sleep as number 1? And it might be completely off, but now we have to defend it now. So what do we got? Who wants to say that?
Sleep is number 1. Yeah, it's I do get more sleep than I did, but I wouldn't have put it number 1 for sure. But that's okay. Yeah, I think in terms of importance, yeah, it's absolutely important. I mean, at the end of the day, if you got a lot of sleep and you're well rested, you're gonna be that teammate that people want to be on the team with. So
I'll defend you on one, and if someone else wants to as well. Like if you don't get,
well, you don't have to defend me much. Because, I mean, I'd normally, if I knew what they were, I wouldn't have voted it 1, but it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. You know, in one sense, I see sleep as just one of the major aspects of health, right? It doesn't have to mean you're getting 12 hours of sleep a day. Not that, but you know, if things begin to crack, that happens with, let's say, diet, fitness, all these other things that we always care about. So in some aspect, we can't even think about mission clarity if, you know, we're constantly running on fumes, right? And sometimes we've had to do that, right, as military, but it's just something that I could say if I had to throw out a answer real quick, I could say that's why sleep could be number 1. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would add on there that it's kind of the culmination of everything you just talked about, 2 through 5, right? I mean, your ability to then be able to sleep at night, right? And to be comfortable where you are, what you're doing, and to have that mindset.
Not outside in the middle of nowhere.
You know, yeah, and being calm, right? And being able to go to sleep and, you know, to be able to, you know, hey, I'm working at a great job with a great environment where I'm collaborating and I'm being a valued member and I'm contributing and I'm compensated right and the work-life balance is there and, you know, all these other things go into that and I'm able to work out, you know, continue being physically fit. I'm able to do all these things like, you know, it all comes down to what is my life like with work and my relationships and my family and outside of when I lay my head down, right? To be able to get to that point at the end of the day where you're comfortable enough to say, I'm not worried about work. I'm thinking about stuff, you know, because we're always constantly thinking about things, but I'm not worried about it. And I'm, you know, able to kind of relax and go to sleep and have a good, healthy, you know, sleep cycle and all this other kind of stuff. And it comes from having those other needs met, right? You talked earlier about the hierarchy of needs and stuff, right? Like, you know, yeah, you need sleep to be able to function, but you can function 3 days without sleep. We've all been there, right? But at some point, your body's going to shut down, right? And so to be able to have a consistent, not necessarily pattern, but to be able to surge when you need to, and to be able to slow down on the back end and that kind of thing. And because you're comfortable in that environment, because all those other needs are met, that may be why sleep could be number 1 for somebody, even if they didn't mean it.
I appreciate the support, Ben. I'm not exactly sure I would rate it at 1, but that's okay.
Hey, thanks, Ken, for being honest on it. Hey, Ken, before we close out, is there any words of either encouragement or advice you'd give to those veterans, our listeners right now that, you know, maybe considering, you know, doing what you've done, which is, you know, getting certified, thinking about their transition now? Any words of encouragement or advice you give to them at this point in their careers, right? And it may be different for different levels, but still.
Yeah, I think for anybody, at the end of the day, words of encouragement, you got this. You've been doing hard stuff in the military career, whether it was 3 years, 5 years, or 20 or 30 years. So you got this. You've been solving it. Just look at it as a problem that you got to solve, and you got to figure out how you best position yourself and your family team for success. And that's what it's really about. And I really believe that certifications out there, whether you become a true project manager, and I say true in its rawest form, right? The skills that you get from certifications absolutely do all the things that we talked about today, help you translate your roles, help you better transition into civilian life, and a big believer in what they can do for you and how they help, and a big believer in the program. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you, Ken.
Yeah, so just shifting back to the preparing throughout your career, how do you think certification training in project management, because you got Agile and PMP, would help currently serving service members get ready for the future fight, right? Not looking at it as a transition program, not looking at it as I want to become a better civilian. What relevance do you see, given your experience, that certification training has as professional development for the military community?
Josh, if I would have had deliberate professional training in those two areas, I would have delivered much better projects. I would have managed much better programs. At the end of the day, it would have made a difference on those teams who were achieving the mission. So at the end of the day, it would have made the whole team better had I had a professional exposure to those programs and training.
And then follow on to that, how different do you think your transition would have been if you would have had these certs 3 to 5 years before you got there, in terms of stress or ability to decide earlier?
Yeah, I think I would have been less stressed. I think I would have felt more comfortable with the transition. I feel like I would have been able to easier. I think I would have been able to translate my skills and not have to a lot easier than what it took. Because it was work. I mean, you got to roll up your sleeves and do the work, and it was work. And I think if I'd been exposed to them earlier, I would have been less stressed and a lot more confident in what I was about to go do.
Cool. Thanks for answering that as a standalone. That's really our passion as a company, is improving the warfighter today and creating a better transition tomorrow. So I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, it's been a great call. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I'm sure there's a million other folks that could have had on, and I'm grateful for the invite, and thanks for letting me give back.
I'll say, thank Ken. I'll send you a thank you message. Jamie, Ben, Josh, thank you guys so much for joining us. I also want to give to our listeners, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day, gentlemen. Bye.
Thanks, all. Bye-bye.